Good morning. My name is Robert Hall, and I'm the Executive Director of Resilience First. And it's my pleasure to welcome you this morning to this Resilience First webinar, which is being held in partnership with Intel. By way of introduction, Resilience First was created just over 2 years ago to help build resilience in business communities, whether that be communities defined by geography or special interest. Those of you who viewed the opening video, we hope you gained a brief insight on our organization. Since its inception, we've attracted a wide range of major companies as champions, as well as a host of affiliated organizations and members to our network, all willing to spread the word through best practice and learnings. In that vein, and working with Intel, we've created a series of technical webinars that are aimed at exploring and showcasing the best of products and services that can help organizations recover from the effects of COVID-19. The series features presentations from a range of companies in the rail, retail, cargo, and energy sectors. Today, we're focused on the topic of cargo and building supply chains. For the session, we have an excellent panel of speakers who will shortly be introduced by our chairman this morning, Siamak Nazari, who is the Global Sales Director for Internet of Things in Transportation at Intel. I invite the audience to ask questions of speakers throughout the session by posting your short written questions in the chat box to the right of your screen. I'm sure the chair will pick out as many as he can as we progress through the webinar. And I should add that the speakers' bios are in your joining instructions. So we won't spend a lot of time going through those, but I do encourage you to have a look at their impressive portfolios. So I'll now hand over to our chairman, Mac. Mac, the floor is yours.
Thanks a lot, Robert. Thanks a lot, everybody, for joining today. Great to have you today in the cargo session. My name is Siamak. It's Mac for short. I'm based out of Amsterdam, and I cover the non-automotive transportation industry from an IoT point of view at Intel. Cargo is one of the big major, let's say, drivers of change within the transportation and logistics business. Obviously, COVID-19 had a big effect on the cargo industry. But I personally don't believe that the cargo industry is going to be changed because of COVID-19. It will only accelerate the change that was already going to come. So even before COVID-19, lots of performance efficiencies, new ways to monetize business were already coming. But COVID-19 just accelerated that. And today we will have a great example of some of our key speakers and innovations that are having a lot of traction in the industry. And hopefully you can pay your attention. Don't do emails. Check out all the great speakers. And then we will also do some Q&A. So for today, guys, we will start with Andy McKeran from Marine and Offshore from Lloyds Register at 10:07. And he will give us an overview of the marine and offshore business and how Lloyds Register is looking at this change through COVID-19 and beyond. And then we will have Jurgen is here as well, senior expert operations at McKinsey and Company, giving us more overview of how supply chain deals with crisis in general, right? I mean, the pandemic, it's not the first challenge that the cargo business has. It has been through the years with multiple crises, and then we get an overview with some numbers on how to do that. And then we have a Q&A session for 10 minutes based on those keynotes. At 10:40, we will start with our innovation session, where we have two great partners of Intel, I must say as well, that are building very innovative solutions, that had a lot of traction before the COVID. So we will have Isabelle Miller, Head of Business Development and Partnership from GPC, talking about how you could use package measurement having great insights for your cargo business, followed by Thierry Batut, Director of Capgemini Digital Engineering and Manufacturing Services, to talk about something what we call a logistics platform, getting much more insights of your cargo, and why these are quite important, especially after COVID. Then at 10:50, if we all on time, we will have a Q&A, and then some closing remarks, and hopefully finish at 11. So everybody, thanks a lot for joining. I talk a bit fast, so I save some time. Andy McKeran, that's some minutes back for you. Please go ahead, and the floor is yours.
Firstly, many thanks indeed, Mac. So I would like to thank Resilience First and Intel for the opportunity to join today's discussion on how technology innovation will support new normal ways of working. So my name is Andy McKeran, and I'm the Commercial Director for the Marine and Offshore business at Lloyds Register. Lloyds Register is a leading provider of professional services for engineering and technology. This morning, I'm going to share some of my insights of how the maritime industry has used technology to keep the global supply chains open, and the technology innovations that could spearhead future developments in this sector as we see these new normal ways of working taking shape. So there is clearly no question that 2020 has turned out very differently from what we had imagined as we toasted the start of an exciting new decade. It's certainly no different for those of us working in the maritime industry. With around 90% of goods moved by sea, shipping's critical role in keeping global supply chains moving immediately came to the fore. Kit-Ak Lim, the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, which is the shipping's regulator, stressed in March that it was crucially important that the flow of commerce by sea should not be unnecessarily disrupted, to ensure that the movement of food and medical supplies required to fight the pandemic was maintained. Call to action was essential as countrywide lockdowns, the closure of borders and travel restrictions presented many challenges for the industry. It prevented port and facility access, which is needed to assure vessel safety and compliance, but more significantly, it's impacted the maritime workforce, with crew changes delayed, and in some cases, not even possible. This has raised and will continue to raise serious questions around the safety and well-being of crews. Thankfully, in the UK and several other countries, seafarers are now considered as critical workers. A very much welcome development, but certainly much more must be done in this area. Shipping is clearly the backbone of world trade, and the pandemic is constantly reshaping the global economic outlook. The June 2020 Global Economic Prospects Report from the World Bank envisions a baseline forecast of a 5.2% contraction in global GDP this year, using market exchange rate weights. This points to the deepest global recession in decades, despite the extraordinary efforts of governments to counter the downturn with fiscal and monetary policy support. The impact of this downturn is already evident in many sectors of the shipping industry. Cargoes carried on container ships are set to fall by 10% this year, the largest decline in this sector's 64-year history, and the volume of idle box tonnage is at levels not seen since the global financial crisis of 2008 and 2009. There are reports that in excess of 11% of the fleet was idle by mid-June. Up to 15% of the global fleet of bulk carriers and container ships was removed from trading as shipments of dry bulk commodities like iron ore and coal and consumer goods contracted. Norway, where many of the North Sea's offshore services, deep sea and rig companies are based, turnover declined by 25% by mid-April, according to the Norwegian Shipowners Association. In the most visible shipping sector of all, cruise, 95% of the fleet has been laid up, and owners are sending older vessels for demolition as the impact of the crisis continues to take its toll on their financial results. The impact of the pandemic is sobering, but shipping is one of the most cyclic of all industries. Historically, it has always shown immense resilience in riding the peaks and troughs of trade, confident around market recovery whilst relying heavily on the skills of its people. Needs for efficiency improvements is now critically paramount, and technology is now no longer an option, it's a necessity to reduce the operational expenditure burden on the industry. Men and women who work at sea or in support of shipping are the backbone of the global supply chain. Often working for long periods away from home, seafarers and those on shore make sure goods, whether that's food, raw materials, manufactured goods, or energy, are safely moved from one place to another to meet world demand. The COVID-19 pandemic has left as many as 300,000 seafarers with expired contracts stranded at sea, presenting ship owners and ship managers with the largest ever humanitarian and logistical crisis facing the maritime sector. Another 3,000 seafarers are unemployed and unable to join their ship with the disruption now affecting their lives and livelihood of nearly 40% of the world's 1.5 million crew. With borders closed, airlines grounded, and inconsistent, ever-changing quarantine and immigration restrictions and testing regimes, only about a quarter of crew changes have occurred since March. This is a huge problem and requires urgent action from governments. Failure to resolve it could impact on the maritime industry's ability to maintain supply chains, as well as recruit and retain the people that are critical to its future, as it goes without saying, the well-being of all concerned. How has the pandemic affected employers like Lloyds Register and its maritime peers? Like many, we have implemented work plans and practices to ensure business continuity while prioritizing safety. This has involved many additional protocols to assess the risks of specific jobs before work starts. At times, we've had to agree to postpone non-critical work, but mostly we've had to look for alternative ways of getting work done, usually by relying on remote capability. Necessity is the mother of invention, but as Max said at the start, many of the technologies that have been embraced during the pandemic have been around for quite some time. We've simply been slow to take up on these because we are ingrained in existing behaviors and practices in maritime. COVID-19 has forced a global routine change, and this has made us all more adaptable and certainly more open-minded. Remote capability for ship surveys has been critical in recent months, keeping employees, ships and cargo safe and sailing as the industry responds to difficult quarantine scenarios and travel restrictions. Across marine and offshore, there has been an increase in demand for remote surveys. At Lloyds Register, more than a quarter of our complex surveys are now undertaken remotely, up from around 10% prior to the pandemic. We expect demand will grow further, and we have positioned remote survey champions in 18 key maritime hubs across the world to support our clients. Remote surveys are just a subset of remote and technology-enabled working. As we all become more comfortable working differently because of the changes imposed on us, we will find new ways to deliver value to those we serve, centered on core skills and expertise. Technology has played a crucial part in helping the shipping industry adapt and address to the recent challenges. The appetite for and acceptance of technology as a result of the pandemic has moved the shipping industry much further forward. As we emerge from COVID-19, with more automation and remote monitoring, the way we manage human and machine interaction will also be vital, underlying the importance of educating and informing the maritime community of the significance of the human element within our new reality. Having harnessed and recognized the power of remote connections during a period of extreme strain, it's evident that the maritime industry is looking beyond quick fixes to longer-term change. This very traditional industry now has heightened appreciation for technology and its benefits. As digital advantages become more apparent and are more readily measured, the pace of technology take-up will accelerate. However, much will hinge on regulatory acceptance of these emergent technologies. To achieve this, maritime stakeholders, such as the flag states, the ports, classification societies, and other key industry partners, must collaborate to drive consistency for remote working practices to ensure equivalence and that these services are systematic and safe for the future. Digitizing services must be the norm for maritime rather than be the exception, with traditional physical attendance surveys merely being enhanced and supplemented by remote surveys and data. This will come through the use of digital technology such as digital twins, artificial intelligence, and machine learning, which are already being applied in many circumstances within maritime and the broader supply chain community, and will be critical as we develop the pathways towards autonomous shipping or progressive demanning. Above all, it's imperative we build confidence that safety levels and the availability of ships can be maintained at all times, as well as open-mindedness about the possibility of what can be achieved through the use of technology. All of those companies like Lloyds that assure the safety of seafarers, ships and cargoes are very mindful that the appropriate technology must be used in the right situation, and there will be circumstances where physical attendance is a necessity. The rise of technology does not negate the importance of people. Technology rather is an enabler, but the value continues to be in the human expertise and experience. There are still experts reviewing inputs and making decisions based on their experience. Technology needs to assist and support people rather than making them feel more stressed or anxious. There can be no underestimating the importance of health and well-being, particularly when it comes to safety within the maritime industry. Technological advances don't just affect the way we live, they can affect the way we perform our tasks and the time it can take to do them. This can easily be witnessed in maritime, and the move from manual operations to the number of automated systems and fewer processes now relying on physical ability, with brain power becoming more important. Positives and negatives should be considered when assessing how some technology can be used to address health and well-being at work. Technology can help us avoid problems. For example, mechanical and software technologies, including advanced automation, can certainly reduce workload and stress by removing difficult or dangerous work. The downside, however, is that there can be danger and fear of more technology being imposed for the sake of it. Implementing technology also involves so much more than just technology itself. There's the integration with existing assets, systems, and processes, as well as training requirements and compliance with standards and protocols. All this requires a much greater industry collaboration. Too many companies develop solutions and then try to find the problem. Instead of truly defining the problem they want to solve and then creating the solution. This can lead to a jigsaw puzzle of solutions that don't do what they said they would do. This has affected the maritime industry's trust of tech promises and, more specifically, digital solutions. We need to recalibrate the industry and move away from the silos that we have today. By aggregating siloed data sources and using analytics, we can provide insights and outcomes that improve efficiency. For example, structural health management solutions can track asset integrity and allow for condition-based monitoring, reducing the operation downtime caused by a time-based inspection regime. These solutions rely on models capable of integrating multiple data sources, including environmental, sensors, and control systems, to aggregate, assess, and ultimately predict asset conditions. For Lloyds Register, this technology innovation, development, and deployment is critical to the creation of a sophisticated class regime and services in the coming years. Technology that enables owners and operators to apply the most appropriate, planned, condition-based, risk-based, and predictive maintenance, operations, or inspection methodologies will save the industry millions in the years to come. This technology and digital approach will also increase personal safety, adding to the benefits of remote capability that may have become to recognize, that many of us have come to recognize during the pandemic, without putting extra burden on the maritime workforce. I'd like to say thank you very much indeed for your time, and I look forward to the questions later.
Thanks a lot, Andy. Those some great insights. I already have some questions that I have to bring up today. So with now, we will move to Jurgen. Are you there? Excellent. Hey, Jurgen.
Hey.
The floor is yours.
Thanks a lot. So let me maybe briefly introduce myself to get started. So I'm Yoon Ha Ha. I'm a senior expert in our operations practice, and I've been co-leading our COVID response team over the last months, and not just basically short-term activities, but also how do we set up companies to manage the time after COVID and to beef up their resilience going forward. So let me maybe touch a few of those themes and also how significant now the impact of the crisis was or still is. And let me get started with a couple of key messages. I think the time to reimagine the supply chain for resilience, what we're talking about, was actually yesterday. And what I mean is, this is nothing that you can start thinking about only now, because the current crisis, let's say it's fully there, right, since a few months. And it's rather now about thinking through what can we learn from this and how can we actually set up to be even more resilient going forward to manage the next disruptions that will surely come. And how we see this is also by looking into the impact of such disruptions. We've done a survey, and I'll show you in more detail in a bit, but basically there's a 5 to 8% annual revenue loss through disruptions where we're not resilient enough right now. And also, just to understand the magnitude of the consequences of COVID, at the moment, it looks like indeed up to $2 trillion in goods trade will actually be rebalanced for the sake of resilience. And this is just one lever that companies are taking. So this will be massive. And also what actually I notice a lot with my clients as well, resilience suddenly is becoming now a CEO priority. And this, of course, needs to sustain over the upcoming years. But I think a lasting impact certainly is that supply chain risk management will play a much more significant role than so far. So let me maybe go in a bit more detail. First of all, we're always talking now about COVID, and I mean, that's the crisis that is here. But let's just have a look at the last couple of years. And we actually noticed that there have been a lot of disruptions, sometimes local or regional ones, very often also disruptions with a global magnitude. And actually, these type of disruptions, they are increasing. They are becoming more frequent. And this is also showing a bit that we're not talking now about how to, let's say, manage disruptions that have now appeared for the first time like COVID, but actually, how do we manage the new normal that is coming up? And what I found quite impressive is looking into the UK, for example, about GDP contraction, and we've just heard about that as well already. But in April, May, we're talking about 24, 26% of GDP contraction compared to last December. Now, you could say this is this is just now 2 months, fair, but if we're looking into how is the GDP development compared to the last peaks, actually this is the highest drop since 1920, I believe. So even in World War II, probably there was not such a steep decline as right now. And also March, April, unemployment has increased quite a bit. I mean, we know the numbers from the US, also in the UK, we're talking about 4 times as many households filing for universal credit as in the same period in the year before. So thinking about what is now the risk that we're really talking about? Well, it is the exposure to the shocks that we have. And for that, we need to understand our full supply chain in terms of what are potential risks with suppliers or political risks, geographical risks, but also how vulnerable are we for those risks. And that is by looking into how resilient are actually our processes. Do we have the right capabilities, the right network to handle with it? What's our financial resilience? And those 2 aspects we need to have an equal view on in order to assess what's really the risk that we're facing. So we've actually asked quite a few experts from the industry what their current vulnerabilities are. And what has come up is here quite interestingly that the major issue of disruption actually has consequences on demand variability. And also if I think about my clients, what they've noticed, especially in this crisis, so luckily they're among those companies that had rather increasing demands, but the demand variability was the issue. And you had some weeks where demand was skyrocketing, and other weeks, basically, it looked like, okay, this was just the bullwhip effect, and now it's going back down. And that's been a major issue also now to handle internally from a production and supply chain perspective. Then obviously looking into the supply as well. So if you're having sole sources or long input lead times, so those are the next major risk of vulnerability. Then also talking about the impact. So here we've done another survey where we assessed how many disruptions did you really have over the last years, and how long were those disruptions, and what did it cost you? And just to become aware of this, I mean, we're talking about almost half a year of EBITDA that is at risk and expected loss over a 10-year horizon. This is now obviously an average across industry, so you see there are differences by industry, but overall, this is a massive incentive to actually work on supply chain risk management and resilience. And so there are 4 topics where we say those are actions to actually rebalance and reimagine the supply chain. It is really stress testing the supply chain in detail. It is prioritizing between short and long-term initiatives. It is also a CEO-driven track and trace governance, and lastly, transforming digital capabilities. And let me maybe only touch 1 or 2 of them by also looking a bit what actually current trends are. Interestingly, what we're seeing now is risk management, as I mentioned before, is becoming on the top of the agenda of supply chain professionals. So 93% now say that they plan to increase their resilience. And I think that's good news. What is also good is that actually almost half of them are saying that they would rather prioritize resilience over now short-term efficiency. And obviously this is driven by the current situation, but I think this is also a helpful push in order to really tackle some of the topics. However, when we then look into what is actually being tackled, it's a lot of these, let's say, more traditional topics like dual sourcing, like nearshoring, like SKU rationalization. And so it's rebalancing, but it's not yet reimagining. And so maybe to end with a few questions here and a few thoughts. So what you should be asking yourself is, do you actually have the full visibility around the vulnerabilities in your supply chain? And I'm really talking here end-to-end from suppliers to customers, but not now only the tier 1 suppliers, reeling all the chain back. And this has been a major issue now in COVID, so that often the supplier was not the issue, but it was actually the tier 3 supplier. And this is an exercise that we've been doing over the last year or 2 to really go back into supply chain and assess it. And that can be extremely helpful in setting up for more resilience. Second, it is about do you really reimagine the way how you can tackle supply chain risk management? So is this really going for some innovative approaches? Are you really using, for example, Industry 4.0 levers? And I love the example from the previous presentation also in terms of now sensors and advanced analytics. And I mean, this is something, for example, in demand planning that can add quite a bit of value, because if you just continue forecasting as usual, then I mean, this will not capture the new reality. And then the third topic being, do you really now discuss supply chain resilience at the highest level? Are you willing to make trade-offs there? So are you setting yourself up also for future disruptions and taking this in a very structured way? And fourth, when you then make such strategic decisions in the organization, to what extent do you actually consider supply chain risks? And talking to my clients, this is something that I believe will become much more normal. Will it fully replace now, let's say, the primary focus on efficiency? Well, probably not. But I guess that there will be a bit more of a balance going forward. Thank you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jurgen. So I think we'll jump now to the Q&A session. I got some questions coming in. So the first question I have here is, the shipping industry is one where ship owners like to sweat their assets. I fully agree. How do you modernize a 30-plus-year-old asset?
Firstly, Robert, I'm going to say thank you for that question. I think it's great because it's very true and does reflect, I think, the previous incarnations of the industry. Things are changing. I think it's as simple as that. We obviously are seeing more regulation coming into the industry. So I'm going to say through things like IMO's targets for 2030 and 2050, which is going to be driving requirements into the industry for ship performance in terms of greenhouse gases. So it will come from regulation. So there will be the pull. There will be the push, which is coming also from the financing side of things. So aspects like the Poseidon Principles, which is a global framework for responsible ship finance. So it provides a framework for integrating climate considerations into the lending decisions, which is promoting international shipping's decarbonisation drive. So that will be also a push, as financing will look to make sure that ships are not just sweated, but they do actually meet the requirements that will be being laid down. I think we're also seeing an increase in ESG reporting within maritime, so the environmental, social and governance aspects of the industry. And I think we will start to see guidelines from both IACs and governments on seafarer welfare, which will also drive as far as regulation is concerned. So what I would say is I think regulation will drive some of that change in a very positive way. How does technology then play in that, and the integration of that is going to be through how do we actually answer some of those questions in a cost-effective way. So I'm going to say that the problem is defined in the fact that the shipping industry will not allow old tonnage to go around the world polluting the environment. So therefore we have to come up with technology, advanced, cost-effective, society-accepted solutions to meet those requirements that will be laid down through regulation. Thanks, Matt.
Excellent. Yeah. So go through finance is one of the keywords I understood there. And then there's a question here, and this might be for Jurgen. What has been the number one lesson from the pandemic for supply chain management? You've gone through some of the crises you've shown. Is there a thin red line to draw there and say, hey, this is like the number one lesson that we, if you look at the past and look at now, have emerged?
Yeah. So the number one lesson that I'm noticing with all of my clients is that this role of supply chain risk management, business continuity, building redundancies is actually becoming much more important again, also going forward. And a lot of the clients are incorporating those into more strategic decisions, for example, about their production footprint or about their supplier network. And I think this will also continue over the next years of playing a very relevant role. And companies have realized that maybe only just optimizing for efficiency in the current year might not always be the right thing, given that these type of crises have such a significant impact and also on the bottom line. So topics like nearshoring is on top of mind of a lot of the companies. Will this now completely mean that, I don't know, for example, all pharma companies will build API capabilities in Europe? I don't think so. But I do think that there will be some shifting into the region again, and also that companies will become much more aware of, let's say, single sources, if either on a supplier side or on a production side in their networks.
Okay, makes sense. Then we have another question here about, I think this is for Andy. So you mentioned the strain that the maritime has come under during the pandemic, right? We saw some numbers jumping down. How do we know? How do we get to the bottom of the issues that these seafarers have experienced during this period?
Yeah, thanks, Mac. And as we said, it's a very serious issue. What we've seen with 300,000 people affected globally for extended periods of time under some exceptionally arduous conditions. So one of the things that we've done with another couple of industry partners, so the UK Chamber of Shipping and the Mission to Seafarers and Safety at Sea, is to launch a industry-wide maritime workforce impact survey, which has got a list of sort of 25, 30 questions so that we can look at some of the primary causes of stress, strain, and the results and impacts of those to the maritime workforce, so that we can then work with other industry partners to look at how we would address those. And I think, building on what Jurgen was saying as well, that moving forward, this is about partnerships. So I think we're moving into a world of frenemies. So yesterday's enemies are tomorrow's friends, if we're going to actually improve some of the both, supply chain aspects in terms of operational efficiencies and breaking down some of those silos. But it's also going to be about actually interconnectivity of making sure that welfare is also treated in exactly the same way, that we can enable partnerships and collaborations to ensure that seafarers' welfare is of the most paramount importance. So those survey results, we'll close that in August of this year, and then we'll look to publish those results in September, October time, and then bring together an industry team to look at how we will address those going forward as a more global maritime industry.
Excellent. I have another question here. This could be both of you, I guess, but the question is, given the medium-term impact on COVID-19, do you have any views on how organizations and their suppliers should consider mapping these risks? So it's about mapping the risks.
I'll let you start.
Yeah. Good question. So also building on Rob's question on if the traditional supply chain risk registers remain valid, right? I believe that a lot of the thinking that has gone into risk management in the past still remains valid. So in terms of what can be potential sources of risks, I think what changes a bit going forward, also post-COVID, is that the risks should be assessed even more holistically, also going back into supply chain, because very often the risks were focused now on the, let's say, immediate sphere of influence of companies. And so really going back a few tiers in the supplier landscape can make lots of sense. And I think what will also change going forward is how these risks are actually mapped then against concrete decisions that are to be taken. So very often what I notice is that supply chain risk management was like this exercise that had to be done, but it never really had any concrete, let's say, consequences. And I think that is what will change in the next few years.
Good, makes sense. I have another question just about Lloyds Register itself. How do you address the technology advancements that are required to enable the autonomousness of all this, cargo business and shipping and the shore?
Yeah, thanks, Mac. I think it's, we're looking at technology insertion for how do we move towards progressive demanning. I think with some of the bigger challenges that we're now seeing in terms of the operational expenditure pressures that are kind of come on the industry because of the, let's say, downturn that we are already experiencing and intend to, obviously will worsen before it gets better. We introduced back in 2017, so our shipwright rules, which is around technology assurance. So it's to work with OEMs or technical providers to look at how do we assess the suitability of those technologies to move towards autonomous systems, which can then be totally interoperable with port logistics, etc. as well, to broaden the supply chain. So that ranges for 5 levels of autonomy, and a new one which we've introduced very recently, which is level 6, which is the fully autonomous. But it basically builds up through the approval system from manual to onboard decision support to on and off-board decision support as we look to obviously control more things from remote control centers. Then it becomes into active human in the loop. Then we move to human on the loop, and then we get to fully autonomous, and then fully autonomous unsupervised. Key to a lot of these technologies is about deployment and minimum viable products, which is not something that we've been particularly familiar with in the maritime industry. But it is basically a case of looking at pilot projects that we're doing through MPA-funded projects in Singapore with some companies to look at ocean-going sea vessels. But these are long-term technology insertions, which will take about a 2-year period before we would have enough data to get confident with the equivalence in terms of shutdown, anti-collision, and the risks that come with that. Do I ever think we'll probably get to full autonomy? Cost effectively, probably not. So I think it would probably be a science project. So I think especially for ocean-going vessels, but I think we will look at progressive demanning and reduction in operational expenditure costs.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. That's great insight. Okay. It's 10:40 now, and it's time for the innovation speakers to come and discuss in a 5-minute pitch what they do to really help move this industry forward, also after COVID. So with that, Isabelle, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Mac. Thank you so much. So hi, everyone, and obviously I hope you enjoyed the start of the presentation. It led on very nicely for me to introduce you to GPC. Andy had kindly made a comment about cost-effective technology and not polluting the environment. And us at GPC with our cargo innovative software have really thrived in this COVID-19 pandemic with the offer that we can provide. So I'm going to run through who we are, what we do, and then I'm going to let the software do the talking. I'm sure however much you'd love to listen to my voice, software speaks 1,000 words when you can see it working. So we are a 3D innovative software company. We work in the healthcare, highways and cargo industry. The software solution I'm talking about today is the bottom right-hand corner, so our freight measure application. We support cargo, transport, logistics, warehousing, you name it, we measure it. Our predominant implementation is with IAG Cargo, and obviously, as you're all aware, the air industry has been completely hit by COVID-19. We've increased their efficiency by 40% with them utilising our 3D dimensioning technology. And I'm sure, as you all know, in terms of the peaks in sales of online sales, that's gone up by 22% and is only growing. So the need to be efficient, the need to get accurate dimensions to be able to plan and ensure that they're making use of those limited air freight opportunities where the majority of their flights are grounded is very, very, very important at the moment. So how do we provide innovation to help businesses recover due to COVID-19? We try to make it as simple as possible, and Andy kindly also helped me there in terms of explaining what is so important about getting technology right, especially due to COVID-19. Employees don't need more stress and more anxiety with what is already going on. There's a lot of pressure in business. There are less people on the warehousing floors, logistics floors. Anyone that is having to process the amount of cargo that is being pushed around the world at the moment, medical kit, as well as online sales from dresses to jumpers. It's all about making it easy for the engineer and the employee. So with one photo, one engineer can get instant volumetrics. It means that the planning is completely accurate for when they're moving things forwards. We obviously also have really benefited from the fact that we can't have too many people on the warehouse floor. And obviously there are a lot of staff, unfortunately, on furlough or on job schemes at the moment, which means that they don't have the amount of capabilities to be doing this measuring and planning to forward think and be efficient and resilient in the current times. Of course, there have also been comments throughout this webinar about protecting the environment, not polluting further. We've all seen some amazing images in terms of we've all been in lockdown and not traveling, and the amount that the environment has benefited from that. With our product, the sustainability aspect is completely acknowledged, because it means that we're not sending half full aircrafts or half full lorries across the world. And of course, we are innovating for the future. The software is specifically designed for dimensioning for cargo and warehousing and logistics, but it is definitely not endless. There are plenty of things that need dimensioning. So my contact details will be on here afterwards if you want to talk about anything in particular. But Bina, if you could start and play the video, that would be great. Make sure this works for everyone.
All right. I hope that gave some great insight about how to do a package measurement. Very useful tool, by the way. Getting a lot of questions from the industry about that. So with that, we will move to the next speaker, Thierry Batut. Are you there? Perfect.
Hi.
The floor is yours.
Yeah, so if we could start by the video first, and then I will just highlight some specific topics after the presentation.
Sure. Getting some work background done. There we go.
When shipments travel the globe, there is always the possibility that something can go wrong. Damage, delay, loss, or theft are always potential risks. If something does happen, companies lose out on revenue, productivity, and goods. And current shipment tracking solutions either fail to provide near real-time visibility or are too expensive. Capgemini's cost-effective connected logistics solution based on Intel's robust ICLP platform increases the visibility, integrity, and security of shipments as they move through the supply chain. Capgemini's solution provides near real-time tracking and monitoring of shipment location, temperature, humidity, shock, ambient light, pressure, and tilt through a comprehensive dashboard for monitoring and analysis, and connects service personnel through programmable notifications and alerts for quick intervention. What if you're shipping sensitive lab equipment? Any excessive tilt or shock may damage it. To mitigate the risk, Connected Logistics helps select the safest and most efficient routes. When transporting electronics, alcohol, jewelry, and other high-value goods, theft or any other loss is always a threat. With cost-effective GPS-enabled tracking, sensors monitor conditions along the entire shipping journey, reporting even if a single item or package is missing. Transporting chemicals, medicines, and perishables requires specific temperatures to prevent spoilage. Connected Logistics monitors regulated interior and outside temperatures in real time. For this demo, the route is set. The truck leaves its origin and is tracked in real time via the green portion of the route while it's on the route and the red portion of the route when it is off route. The truck arrives at its destination. The dashboard displays shipment status. Shipment details provide information about the customer, pickup and delivery, and sensor tags, including temperature, humidity, pressure, ambient light, shock, tilt, tracking, and battery level. Solution components include sensors and gateways that capture and aggregate shipment data at the edge, and equipment at the back end to perform detailed track and trace analytics that help monitor a shipment's journey and optimize logistics based on learnings from previous journeys and current environmental conditions. And Intel technology is utilized end to end. As delivery is completed, the retailer sees the shipment has been delivered and knows there is another happy customer. Let's recap the benefits of Connected Logistics. Easily deploy a customized tracking dashboard. Seamlessly integrate devices with minimal onboarding. Track packages.
Okay, thanks, Jerry. Can we? Do you have something to share on this? We are a bit out of time, but I'm willing to give up some of my closing notes. I can speak quite fast, so go ahead.
Yes, I will. So just to highlight, and I will not go via the value proposal we've been talking about. Key topic here is definitely about the journey, and as it had been said previously, the point is the COVID-19 has just highlighted the need for more, I will say, a tracking solution, and this solution was provided by Capgemini a year ago. So that's the typical journey. It's definitely to go from one warehouse to another with in the middle truck road or air, whether it's air or sea transport, in order to deliver goods and monitor them. Key point is about the fact that this is a solution which is device agnostic. We've got solution with Intel, but we can provide with others and potentially devices provided by the customer itself. And we address, in fact, 3 type of users. The one that will be monitoring the shipment itself, the one which will do the administration of that solution, meaning you have to manage what we call logistics of the logistics, which is about how you recycle the devices that you've been using for shipment for another one. And obviously, field shipment crew that will do the peering on the field to allow and start the monitoring. So that's a solution which is cloud-based that you can, I would say, use from any location, and which is mainly, I would say, targeting customers which are willing to get more efficiency on their logistic, or also to provide additional services to the customer, to the end customer, which is about getting some more details about various variables that they want to monitor, whether it's temperature, as it has been said, or it's about tilt, depending on the various, I will say, shipment that will be delivered.
Great. Thank you very much, Thierry. So let's a few minutes behind that. Let's go to the Q&A. Any questions for Thierry and Isabelle coming in? I have one here. So this is for Isabelle, I guess. Is this only working on a tablet, what you're showing, or how can you utilize your software in another way of measurements? I think you're on mute.
There we go. Can you hear me now? It's completely hardware agnostic. We can utilize any device, Windows, Android based. All we do need to utilize is an Intel 3D RealSense camera connected via USB. So yeah, in terms of flexibility, we do our utmost to be as cost effective. So if you've already got existing hardware, we try and utilize that existing hardware with the 3D cameras.
All right, thank you. And then I have one more question, and I think this is for Thierry. How is the backend and the, let's say, user interface for your platform arranged? Is that something that Capgemini is offering, or do you work with partners on that?
No, that's, I mean, we are a global IT company, more than 250,000 people around the world. So we are delivering that service, and we use our capabilities in order to build these various systems. So whether it's the backend or the connectivity, all this component has been deployed by ourselves and maintained by ourselves.
Okay, very well. Then I have another question, and I think this could apply for both. It's what have been the drivers for using this specific technology for some of your customers? I know, Isabelle, maybe you can start with, you said IAG, maybe example of how to use it.
Yeah, of course. So the main drivers for most of our clients that utilize the software is all about the knock-on effects, so the planning onwards. So of course there are benefits from cost efficiency and cost recovery from cross-charging clients back when they don't give you the right dimensions. However, the real impact is the efficiency of onward planning, whether that be onto an aeroplane or whether that be onto another lorry. That is the main driver. It's all about cost efficiency moving forwards and utilising in the current environment, so that we're not, we're not missing out on certain delivery time slots, because they just can't risk that in the world that we live in at the moment.
Excellent, thank you. Thierry, you want to do few words on that too?
Yes, as I said, as we are agnostic, we can integrate multiple type of devices, and that was one request of our customers, the ability to monitor multiple, I would say, supply chain supplier, and also be able to have all these data for two means. Once it's about efficiency, to have a better understanding on how the various containers are used, how full they are. That's one. And second, be able to provide, as I said, additional services. Get the end customer having more details about how the shipment went from point A to point B, and to ensure that the temperature was managed well, if it was in a ASC container, or is whether the shock were limited when you've got some very goods that needs to be, I would say, taken carefully.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks for that. So we're almost getting to the end of this session. Thanks everybody for joining. I learned a lot today. One of the final things I would like to say is that today you can see the importance of the ecosystem coming together, because we need the consultants to have the overall view. We need the partners to provide the solutions. And then obviously we as Intel, as technology enablers, will be part of that ecosystem as well. So everybody, thank you for today's session. And maybe Robert, you want to do a final word?
Thank you, Mac, for doing an excellent job. This has been a fascinating hour. That's covered a lot of ground. On behalf of Resilience First and Intel and all our partners, I would like to thank the speakers and the chair for their excellent contributions today. We will be circulating a short summary in due course, and I hope you can join us again for our next webinar with Intel, which is tomorrow on energy and power at the same time. So thank you very much and take care. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.